Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Nice seeing you all. And today I'm going to talk about Subsquid network and how we are democratizing access to on-chain data. So first of all, why should we care? The story of Web3 is generally about the data being sovereign, and the data is actually stored on-chain, which means that it's replicated across all the network, all the nodes in the network, and is guaranteed to be untampered and available. From the very beginning, that was very basic data. So it all started with just the BTC balance that you have on a blockchain of Bitcoin. That is already powerful enough to provide basic transactions. Then at around 2015, Ethereum came about, and this Turing complete EVM enabled app data to be a lot more complex, and we've seen first smart contracts. Oops, sorry, I forgot clicking it out. Then in 2017 up to the DeFi summer 2020, we got DeFi applications and a lot more sophisticated financial data stored on-chain. And still we have 100% guarantee that this data is forever available and easily accessible. And now we are entering the world of multi-chain. We got a bunch of networks. Polkadot actually pioneered the app chain thesis, and we now see that the number of chains is growing exponentially, while the data that is stored on those chains is currently at about 100 terabytes by our estimates, and we will probably going to reach like petabyte scale in the coming years. Another important plot to see is the number of monthly active users. Here's the MetaMask data from like about 2 years ago. It also grows exponentially, and each user generates a lot of activity across multiple chains. And as the app chain thesis gets validated, this data is getting more and more scattered across multiple smaller and smaller chains, each hosted the app data. So all in all, we can say that from 2022 onwards, the app chain thesis has been validated. Something that Polkadot has invented a few years ago, now coming as a mainstream to Ethereum world and EVM. And everyone is thinking that the scaling solution is really each app having its own chain with the all sovereign data sitting in there. But at the same time, the data infrastructure is not really available for the long tail of small chains. Which means that if you launch in an app chain or, for example, a smaller parachain, you're actually into trouble of getting support for explorers, wallets, and in general for providing data to aggregators. Another problem is that, like, as the data is getting fragmented across like many chains, it becomes increasingly hard to for the user to get a glimpse of how your interactions are scattered across multiple applications that you're using. So for example, the simplest case, you have a wallet, and normally you would need to have an aggregated view of all your assets across multiple chains. And for example, if you just onboard it into a smaller chain, there is no chance that your favorite wallet gonna show these transactions. For example, Talisman is getting a really great job of aggregating this data across multiple parachains, but as we enter the world where we have a lot of L2s and L3s, it's getting more and more complicated to aggregate across this like whole zoo of different chains. And for chains, it becomes also quite expensive to secure support from RPC and indexing providers. And this is crucial for enabling aggregators like Dune Analytics, DeFi Llama and others to show their data, so that you get a lot more users coming to your chain and you have a lot more visibility. And this is exactly like what we see from a bigger ones. But if you're just sort of a parent chain, there is no way you can actually show your data to other providers. So how we are solving this with the Subsquid network? So the main goal is to make sure that whenever you launch a chain, you can put this data in a distributed data lake, which is Subsquid network. And this data becomes infinitely available. And that's how we're going to democratize indexing and querying this data on chain. So the way it works is that whenever you put your on-chain data in the Subsquid network, it is split into small chunks. And these small chunks are distributed and replicated across among many workers in the network. So that's why you get availability and the guarantees that it's never tampered. So what it gives for a chains is that the data is now freely available for explorers, wallets, aggregators, and indexers. And for example, for a wallet, there will be no additional work to integrate your new chain to show the transactions of the users, to show TVLs and like any other statistics that you normally expect from a new chain. For devs, integrating using the Subsquid network eliminates the cost of using RPC by 90% because all the read operations from the archive data are now possible to do from the network itself. And this is actually about 90% of all the traffic for the RPC. For when it comes to indexing and building dApps on top of your favorite chain, Subsquid network enables a lot more faster indexing. And thanks to Squid, you can build a GraphQL API that aggregates data across multiple chains. Like everything that is supported by the Subsquid network can be put together. It also enables real-time handling of reworks. So you get this data immediately available. And the indexing process is completely decoupled from the data. So you can run and install it just from NPM. So there is no need to run a network node. There is no complicated compilation process. So it's a lot more user-friendly compared to the mainstream versions like subgraphs. When it comes to analytics, usually it is very expensive for platforms like doing analytics to onboard new data because they have to run and backfill all the data from the Genesis block. With Subsquid network, as the data becomes freely available, it is possible to scan millions of blocks at zero cost. And again, since the data from multiple chains is aggregated in a single place, you can aggregate this data across multiple chains and then transform and put it into arbitrary data target. Postgres, Parquet, BigQuery. And again, this kind of analytic process is very easy to run and install. You can do it directly from NPM and run it either on premises or on a hosted service provided by Subsquid. The secret sauce here is a novel business-to-protocol economic model that we introduced in the Subsquid network. And the idea is that the chains pay a fixed subscription fees to the network, while the data then becomes completely free for all the consumers, regardless of how much data they consume. That means that as a dev or as an aggregator or as a wallet developer, you don't have to care about the data bandwidth at all. So you don't have to care about RPC spans. You don't have to care about running any in-house infrastructure. You just like get this data for free, while the networks get the exposure for all the tools. So we are really a chain-oriented protocol, and our model is like business to protocol. So the roadmap is that first we run things internally in a centralized way and focused on the SDK to work with this data provided by the Subsquid network. This is provided by Aerosquid SDK, which is available for EVM and going to be released for Substrate in a coming week or two. By the end of the August, we're planning to run a testnet where everyone can participate and get the data from the networks already supported by the Subsquid network. That would include all the major EVM ones and possibly Substrate. And by the end of the year or in Q2, there will be public testnet where everyone will be able to even run a node in the network. And afterwards, there will be mainnet launch. If you want to participate in the testnet, feel free to scan the QR code and fill in the form. We would be very much happy to onboard. And the first iteration, as I said, will be by the end of the August. And if, for example, you're a professional infra provider, we'll be happy to onboard you to the infra track. Or if you're just a retail user or a developer, you get additional chance to get testnet tokens and get allocation afterwards. So this is it. This is probably the most important slide from the whole presentation. Would be happy to answer any questions.